And we're live. Welcome everybody back to Freedom Fight Expo. We're on day 2. I'm your host, Jason Wilson. Today we have another lineup of phenomenal speakers. But yesterday, if you haven't seen that broadcast yet, you can go back to our YouTube channel and catch day 1. Uh, Today is no exception. You're going to be inspired. You're going to be motivated in order to overcome whatever you're facing right now, whether it be PTSD, suicidal ideation. Today, you're in the right place to be encouraged. So, we're going to get started today. We're actually going to start with one of our sponsors, and this event would not be possible without the wonderful sponsors that we have. Yesterday, we featured HR for You, the Hounds of Business Community, and also Erase PTSD Now. So let's get started. Jean Ibanez Payne is the author of Reclaim Your Worth, a story of abuse, empowerment, and building a life on her own terms. It's a gripping memoir detailing her journey from a young Latina navigating societal expectations to reclaiming her power and identity. Jean vividly recounts experiences in male-dominated environments like the military and corporate sectors, where she faced harassment, discrimination, and personal trauma that left her feeling powerless and unseen. Her story is a powerful call to action, challenging societal norms that restrict women's roles and success criteria. Through resilience and self-discovery, Jean inspires readers to reject stereotypes and embrace their true potential. Reclaim Your Worth is a testament to the human spirit ability to triumph over adversity, offering hope and empowerment to anyone striving to define their own worth and rewrite their life's narrative on their own terms. So we're going to get started with our first speaker today, Deborah Lee Murrow. Deborah Lee Murrow is a fine artist specializing in pen and ink and mixed media. After a decade in New York City, she is now living and working in Scottsdale, Arizona. She is known for big, beautiful, colorful art and has a knack for bringing people together through art to explore your God-given unique gifts and talents. Welcome to the stage, Deborah.
Hello, everybody. How are you today? I'm so excited to be here. I am going to start off with helping you explore your gifts. So, if you don't have this right now, I want you to grab a pen and a paper and a pen, and you can do a little follow along with me. So before I dive into that, I'll give you a second to grab that. I started out in 2000, and I came to this realization, this gifting that God gave me after a revelation of the power of words. So our words are so powerful. I went on a spiritual journey, unawares to me, to explore my God-given gifts. And in that process, I was living alone and I was in New York City in a little 2x4, and I kept journaling. And I did The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. She suggested morning pages. So the morning pages really turned out to be journaling in gratitude. So it was so interesting because what I was writing down was coming to pass, the good, the bad, the ugly. So it really gave me a deep understanding of words, and I really didn't know which way to turn, where to go from this. So I just started creating with this amazing pen brush. Now, this journey was not easy. I really didn't know what I was doing for the longest time. But when I had this brush, and if you're dealing with depression or sadness or anything, there is magic. Let me just show you this. There is magic in painting. And the reason why is when you do this sort of motion, it releases. It starts to circle and cycle your right side, right? So I remember vividly one day I was on my living room floor, back living with my mom and dad, and I literally just took this pen and I went like this. And all I did was go like this. And I was breathing, and it's something rose up out of me. And I just felt like so much better. So art really does heal. You got to give it a chance. And here's the thing, you got to sit in the yuck. So what? You don't know how to draw. You know, I believe that everybody's an artist, and we always should say, I'm an artist and I'm creative. I start off all my classes like that because we got to cement that in to our brain. Because if we go in thinking, oh, I'm not, and I'm not gonna be able to do this, and all of a sudden you do a workshop with me, it's not going to make a big impact. The big impact is when you express, I'm an artist and I'm creative, and you go for it, right? You go through this. So what I'd like to do today is I'll share a little bit of my story as we go along. But I'd love to show you, and you could have I'm using my brush pen, lovely brush pen. I'm going to show you how to process through art. I'm going to show you three things. I'm going to show you how I use this with words and scripture. That'll totally adds to this whole process. I'm going to show you and graphic recording. Actually, neurographics, excuse me. I'm going to show you some neurographics. That's a new kind of art process that I've just run into. So let me show you this real quick. So one of my superpowers is I'll be speaking, and as someone is speaking, I'm recording. So this piece right here was done live from an event online. And then the cool thing is you get to, I digitize it, and then you can color a small copy. And I have tons of freebies on my page right now. I just got off an event last weekend. So you are going to be able to have a coloring extravaganza. So with your pen, Sharpie, or whatever you're doing, the first thing, excuse me, the first thing I did was I wrote this I am statement. The I am statement was, I am healthy, healed, happy, and blessed. That's the very, very first piece I ever did. And all I did was doodle around it. So there you go. My secret sauce is out. I write a word and then I doodle around it. And I'll show you how I do that, including scripture. And I'm telling you, it's a game changer, and you totally can do this. So I'm going to start on my board. I'm going to put it into three areas. So I'm going to do this in this corner and bring it up a little closer. All right. So I'd like you to think. I'd like you to think about something that you need right now. What would be something that you need in your life right now? And we're going to put it in a word. So I'll give you some examples, some attributes of love, peace, joy. Could be financial, could be money, could be happiness, right? And then we're going to take a couple big breaths. I've learned to breathing through the nose, and there's another one I just learned, breathing just through the mouth. And I feel like I get more oxygen down into my belly. And then, okay, that sets the stage. It's definitely for healing. Look up all types of breath work. In through the nose, hold it, out, Okay. And one more time. Okay. So I'm going to use the example of love. So just write love any which way on here. I like cursive. You don't have to do cursive. And I'll show you a little super song. So I'm going to write love. L-O-V-E. Okay. So the beauty of a calligraphy letter, calligraphy just means fancy. So the way I make this fancy is I add a little bit of thickness to some of the sides. Not all the sides, just some of the sides. Tops, around, right? I'm going kind of fast, so it's not super neat because I want to get to all these. And the E. Now, I love my book of promises, right? So you could open to anything. You could have a favorite scripture. I know one off the top of my head, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plan the Lord has for me, plans to prosper me and not harm me, plans to give me a hope and a future. Now, the most amazing thing that I figured out is while I was writing scripture and writing scripture ever so slowly, there is beauty to that. So let's say I have this, right? I had a little one, so I don't have to turn the big page. I'm going to write the scripture all along the sides of the love, and I'm going to turn it. And when I do that, I actually have to pause and think. Selah is through all of the Psalms. So what you're going to do is you're going to give yourself a break and think of a telephone wire. You're writing scripture, you're thinking scripture, you're saying scripture. So you have a direct line to the Lord through his word. So it would go something like this. I would start here. For I, and I'm going to turn it. Know the plans. I'm going a little fast, so it's not super neat, but it's okay. I have, here I'm turning again, for you. Plans to prosper, turning, and not harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. So I also want to say something else about this. While you're writing, your brain, this is the art side. Say, put your hand on your right side, say art side, right? This is the left side. This is all words. So it's a bit challenging to do the both. And honestly, I've spelled some words wrong that I know, like this. But it's not that I didn't know it and know how to spell it. It was a function of the brain. So you almost have to go, the word says line by line, precept by precept. You have to go word by word sometimes. And I had a writer in my class. She was so upset with herself that she spelled a word wrong, but it wasn't her ability. It was a function of the brain. So I highly recommend a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. You will understand what is going on. It's a book I teach out of to teach portrait drawing. So let's say I have this all up there, right? So here's my secret doodling, all right? I like open-ended lines, all right? So the open-ended lines go something like this. Open-ended lines. Oh, maybe I stick a heart in there. How many of you are on the phone and you have a piece of paper and you're doodling? Let's take it to the next level, right? So this isn't rocket science. It's patterning, right? Patterning. bird up there. And lots of hearts. I really, I love Hebrew, and I learned the Lord's name in Hebrew, and I usually put it in here somewhere. So let's go like this. Let's just turn it. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Okay? It just kind of blends right in there, right? So here you have again, I'm just doodling and how super fun it is. So I have a Love Is series, and I do these all the time for cards. Coaches hire me to put in some words after their coaching program is done. So these are all little samples of cards that I have digitally on my website. Okay, so that's one. We're doing good. Okay, so now I'd like to show you some neurographics. Neurographic is creating some art with intention, but it's not sitting there and drawing like a scenery. You don't know what you're actually going to draw. It's a series of lines and circles. And there are intro classes to this on YouTube that are just phenomenal. It's been around for a very, very long time, but there's a neuroscientist in Russia who is making a big splash with this. So I will just move this up here and show you what I mean. And I am going to switch to a Sharpie. All right. And again, it's a series of lines. So let's just say this right here was the back of the paper. I'll show you what I did. This is the tree of self-development. So on the back of the paper, I wrote out some words that I wanted to get better at or grow at or surrender, friends, commission, art, organization, health, muscle, income, peace, rest, right? These are some words, right? So you pick a topic. Let's say we're talking about working out, okay? So again, maybe I want to put muscle, workout, time, because we need time to work out. And for 2 minutes, you would write a series of words that related to the topic that you're going to draw. Okay, so let's say I filled all this out and I have 20 words up there. It takes a little while, so I just want to get to the exercise so you guys can grab a hold of it. So you want to start from one side, and you're drawing these lines, and you're intersecting the lines, but you're just drawing them any which way, mindfully, right? You're drawing these mindfully. There's a couple different techniques that I've seen. So let's say you're frustrated and you can't get your workout. So that frustration looks like this, maybe like that, right? So now we want to harmonize it. We want to put a circle around that. And this whole exercise is about turning these sharp edges, these V's to U's. So I'm just going to round out these sharper edges. I'm going to fill out these. I'm going to extend these to my harmonizing circle. And you totally can put a scripture. I just want to reiterate that this whole concept isn't particularly Christian, but you make it, right? You make it Christian. So put a scripture in your 20 words, all right? Here, you're rounding out, rounding. And you come to here and you're rounding. Any word intersects. And in the process, you can make more lines in this. You're making it up. So whatever feels good, you're in the flow. I remember this one time I was doing a big painting. And this painting was the flag. And of course, it had stripes. So I had a big brush and a big bucket of paint. And I went down paint and I'm making these stripes all the way across. All of a sudden, when I was doing this action, I was by myself, I unconsciously took a very deep breath. And I'm like, it took me for surprise because I'm like, wow, I really needed that. So art makes you breathe, right? Art calms you down. Art calms the left critical side that is constantly telling you, no, you're no good. You're da 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 da. It's popping up, right? So you don't want that. You need some peace, right? Everybody knows what exercise does. Everybody knows, well, look it up. If you don't know what breath does for you, it is a game changer. Breath work, stretching, right? You got to do these things for life, right? And yeah, they're game changers. You have to make time for yourself. Again, you have to make time for yourself. Nobody's going to do that for you. You really have to do that yourself. And if you're struggling right now, here's another thing, and you're keeping it inside, that's a no-go. What is revealed is healed. So you go to a friend, trusted friend, a counselor, a pastor, anybody, right? Especially God. But if you need a physical person to hear you, that you got to get it out. What is revealed is healed. And here's the other thing: you can't solve it. If you're in the middle of a problem right now, you cannot solve that problem with the same level of thinking. You could be caught in a loop, right? PTSD is this reoccurring thing that happens, right? You want freedom from that. Maybe your word today, maybe I shouldn't have done love, maybe it's freedom, right? That's a great word. Okay, so I want to introduce just a couple of art mediums if you want to take this to another level. And by the way, when this piece is all done, this neurographic piece, you want to color it, but very similar to my rules, you don't have to color in the lines. And what I mean by that is this color, you want to color in 2 cells or areas at a time. So you have to go, I encourage people, oh, here it is, upside down. Is that right? Oh, I don't even know. Yeah, that's right. So I encourage you, go up with your color. The first time I went like this with a piece of my artwork in a class, I went like this. Everybody just like, why? Because they probably got yelled at as a kindergartner for going outside the lines. So I want to give you permission. So this is my first medium I want to share with you. It's chalk pastel. I love chalk pastel because watch. I can put this right underneath of it. And look how pretty that is, right? And then a second favorite is, well, let me go to this one because it's dry. I have 2 dry, 2 wet. This is a oil pastel, okay? The oil pastel, again, I'm going to go with making a design over my design. So I love doing that. So heart, right, over it. Again, there are no rules. Constantly designing, and there is beauty. And people are reading, right? There is beauty coloring inside of something. That's relaxing. That's why adult coloring is so big. Sometimes people don't like to color my stuff because I force decision making. And that's a gift from God. I did not like come up with this. It just kind of came out of me, right? It just didn't feel right connecting the lines. So it just know that there are some things to color in and totally color in. And I want to give you freedom. Again, we're going outside the box here. We're going outside the box here. Let me go back to that neurographics. We're making those round circles to mimic the neurons in our brain which have grooves and deep memory. So what does this do? Breathe. You circle it. You round out those sharp edges. What does sharp mean to the brain? It means danger. What does rounding mean? Oh, comfortable. My couch is round. It's comfortable, right? So you totally want to do that. Okay, two more mediums. This is a watercolor crayon. I'm going to dip this in a little bit of water and I can go with my finger, right? And then if you want a little more detail, I'll show you. Dip this in a little water. This is watercolor, a watercolor pencil. Takes a little more time. Dipping in some water. Here it comes. Get there. And again, I'm big at using finger, right? I was at a show where I did some of these canvases, and that's oil paint stick, and you put it on and you blend it with your fingers. This guy flies by and I stopped. I'm like, oh, do you want to join us? And he goes, no, trauma. He goes, I got held back for not finger painting in kindergarten. True story. So we can giggle about these once they're out, right? We can giggle about those, and we can heal from anything. God is so good, but you gotta surrender it. You gotta let it out. So I am super excited to be here. Here's some other graphic, not neurographics I did. This was pretty interesting. I was talking. I was wanted better sleep. So unconsciously, mind you, you see this guy in the corner with a mask on and a nose? That unconsciously, because it was all about sleep, I wrote all these words down. And that's what came out. And I'm getting more tenacious on the things that I need to get better sleep. I'm diving into more health and wellness. I'm going to bed earlier. Or maybe not. I'm still working on that one. So all these things, right? Here's one more. This was income, double your income. I decided to 10x. Need some income. So many things that you can do with art. And I also want to encourage you to make a mess. I will give you another example. I was in teaching a class, and the way I start out doing the pen and ink is this. It's simply this. It's make a mess, make figure eights, roll this, see how it works, right? That was the thing. So all of a sudden, I walk over to someone else and someone says, hey, go back, go back, go back. This lady's like crying. She was crying and shaking like nobody's business because I had her make a mess. And I'm sitting there thinking, whoa, what's going on? Like we're just playing, right? But not to her. She had been adopted, and her whole life she has performed. It was sports. She was so happy to be adopted. She was, what's the word? Perfect. She had deep-seated perfectionism, and it came out through this. Well, we prayed. She threw up that night. She threw up the next morning. Someone else prayed for her. That demon of perfectionism kicked out. So please, 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 I encourage you to do some art. I have some freebies I'm going to give to Jason. Maybe he'll email people who've signed up. And there's a ton of freebies on my site where you can download and color. And they're all from these wonderful conferences that I've been at that I'm doing. I'm recording these words live. So there are messages in there. Make sure you read all the words and connect the dots. It's kind of like a hide and seek type of thing. So I'm so happy to be here. Jason is putting on a wonderful show. We have wonderful people lined up for today. I was busy yesterday. I can't wait to dive into the show yesterday and see all these amazing people giving you the tools and the tricks and the habits and ideas to get better, right? Freedom Fight Expo. It is, it's just a wonderful thing. Wonderful, wonderful. So it looks like we have a little more time unless Jason pops on. I'm going to show you this cool piece right here that you can do at home because everybody has clothing, right? This is a fabric collage. And this piece right here is made out of just like craft paper. And I covered it with a shirt that I no longer wanted to wear. And this is a shirt, it's a flower. And again, this is lifted scrap paper. And I layered some things on here. So butterfly, oh, maybe it's that one. Oh, there's my signature. Yeah. So butterfly on a flower. Super fun, super easy to do. I have a couple of events coming up. I'm doing a huge cowboy boot mosaic. So these shrink plastic pieces right here, they start out like this, right? And with simple colored pencil, you bake them and they go like this. So I'll be in Avondale October 4-5, and it's free. It's a community event. I love community projects. Is there anybody's having something community come up? I do these large canvases that everybody helps create on. But this one's going to be they're going to be cowboy boots on a cowboy boot with stars. So that's going to be really fun too. I'm super excited for that show, and it's a fair. So come enjoy some good food. Come enjoy some rides. Bring the family. So that's happening in October. And in November, I will hopefully, I haven't solidified this yet, be at Canal Convergence, which is a show in downtown Scottsdale. I know we're talking to the world here, but if you're local, and they redesigned the canal. So I'm going to be there with fabric, doing something on fabric and light with, and it's a night event. So it's all about the light and the reflection and lots of love. So what else can I tell you guys? A little bit more about my journey. When I went down to New York City, I was free from a corporate job. I was living in New York and in Massachusetts, not so happy. I was like, I heard somebody say you could have fun with your natural talents and abilities. So I took off, went down to New York, and I said, okay, let me try voiceover, let me try singing, dancing. And I just played all along, reading, played, working out. And I would go outside. If you live in a city, go outside one day and don't have a plan. Let God direct your footsteps. And I walked the walk signs. So I got to a corner and I would go and walk one way. I would wait, walk another way, and I would just walk all the way through there. So okay, so we are time. I love being here. This is so exciting. Again, go to colormeartspa.com, get some freebies, holler out to me. I do lots of stuff on Zoom, teaching and coaching. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. And I look forward to seeing the rest of the people this weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for that wonderful presentation. I mean, it's so awesome what you do. I just love it. I hope everybody else enjoyed that as well. Our next speaker for today is Yanni Charalambous. He's going to be joining us in just a second. Yanni Charalambous is a certified life coach. His coaching practice embraces the transformative power of mindfulness meditation and mentoring. Through persistent self-care and a deep understanding of human stressors, he has guided numerous professionals towards clarity and peace. Welcome to the stage, Yanni.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, well, let's begin with my story of why I'm here. I began many years ago, had no idea about positive thinking and mindset at all. So my journey was from childhood and what I experienced with my parents growing up and the anger and the rage going on. And this created the subconscious program within me to have no idea what was going on growing up as an adult. And I experienced a lot of mental health, depression, anxiety, and negative analysis thinking. So I spent a lot of my time just making the wrong decisions and choices in life because I never knew about the mindset or I never knew what positive and negative thinking meant. So I was reacting to whatever was coming up within the mind program in the moment, whatever thoughts I was reacting to and creating negative experiences, negative choices for myself, those around me, the universe. And my journey moving forwards was discovering the secret positive thinking. Someone introduced me to the DVD many years ago and told me you can shift your mindset by using positive thoughts. And for me, that was the empowering journey to where I am now moving forwards. So yeah, my journey going back was a lot of negative experiences with depression, mental health, panic attacks as well. So to be where we are today, especially today being International Day of Peace and also coming up in October is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's key for us to be aware of how to let go of the mind program, the thoughts and the non-attachment to thoughts and emotions. And what I discovered a few years ago was Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian clearing method, which means to correct an error within your subconscious mind and to make a right. So whatever's going on within the mind program, we're here to whatever we perceive as negative within the mind, whatever comes up is memories replaying. So we're here to correct past errors. Me, my family, relatives, and ancestors from eons of times to the present moment. So whatever we have done, we're here to erase those memories from replaying. And hence why my journey here is to help people and guide people to let go of the mind program, to let go of attaching negative thoughts and emotions, be it within your personal life and your business life. And it all begins with ourselves because we take 100% responsibility. And that's the Hawaiian clearing method of Ho'oponopono, is taking
Laurel
100%
Weirs is a
responsibility
licensed marriage.
for whatever comes into your life. Everything is your reflection. So whatever you see as negative within, there is no out there. We take responsibility and we see that as, okay, what's going on within me that I'm experiencing this negative perception or situation or problem, be it whatever is going on financially, spiritually, mentally, karmically, whatever is going on. We're here to clean and erase those memories. And the main mantra within, there's so many different cleaning tools with Ho'oponopono. However, the main mantra is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. So we say, I'm sorry to the memory come up, the thought come up, again, me, my family, relatives, and ancestors, or whatever's gone on that I'm experiencing this problem with whatever's going on in that moment with another person or with this situation within your life. Thank you for showing up and giving me one more chance to erase these memories. And I love you, then transmutes that memory into divine light. And then thus it goes through the superselves. So it's all about healing. It's all about identifying the thoughts coming up, the memories replaying, letting go of the attachments and the non-reactions of my journey, of where I am at the present moment. And yeah, if you want to maybe close your eyes or keep them open, we can do maybe a 5-minute meditation of the mantra, and then you sit within the moment. So if you're experiencing anything within yourself, you can use it as a meditation method. You can use it in the morning. First thing in the morning is really effective as well. So you can clean the day of what is going to come up within the mind. And also before you sleep, 5 minutes before you sleep is really, really effective. So you can let go of what has gone on within the day, and you can go to sleep in a peaceful frame of mind. So if you want to close your eyes, keep them open. It's up to you. It's your choice. If you want to repeat the mantra, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. We'll do this for about 5 minutes.
I think that Yanni got stuck in that meditative state. It's okay, everybody, to come out of that meditation. We're going to move on to our next speaker, but before we do that, another word from our sponsor. Dr. Constance Leland is founder of Level Up Academy. It's more than just an educational platform. They're a powerhouse of transformation, innovation, and impactful leadership. Level Up Academy is dedicated to empowering businesses and individuals to reach their highest potential. Their mission is to create a global community of trailblazers who lead with purpose, passion, and a commitment to excellence. And our next speaker for today is my good friend, Sarah O'Brien. Sarah O'Brien is a trauma-informed licensed consultant, coach, and licensed psychotherapist, and also Chief Mental Health Officer of Circle of Friends Club. Welcome to the stage, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Of course, I'm happy to be here as the Chief Mental Health Officer of Circle of Friends Club, and my dear friend Jason always giving me the mic and letting me say what I need to say. So I've been back and forth about how I want to present this. For anybody that follows me, you know, I have a lot of educational information in my posts and in a lot of other of my talks. And so I'm going to do a little bit of that today, but we got a lot of that already. So I'm going to take a little bit more of a personal stance, I guess, as I share here today. But first, let me say about all the speakers yesterday, I listened to every single one. And so far today, and part of the reason I'm not going to go into all the kind of academic stuff is like everybody else kind of did that for me. So yes to neuroscience and brain change. Yes to intergenerational trauma being passed down. Yes to collective trauma experienced in communities. Yes to generation after generation of trauma in countries and in places like that. Yes to addiction and suicide attempts and need for trauma-informed care. Yes to traumatic grief. And yes to art and creativity for healing. I believe in all of those things. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have been practicing and providing mental health treatment for adults for over 15 years. The first half of my career was spent in public health settings, public mental health settings, so community services board in and around the Richmond, Virginia area. A lot of broken systems there, including systems in which I worked. And so I experienced trauma in workplaces as well. So I've been treating trauma for a long time. I have experienced tons of my own trauma, and I am going to let you know what I am doing to heal, but I am coming with the real talk. So for everybody that knows me, I'm always trying to say the thing that nobody else wants to say. And I am willing to do that, and probably with some expletives, some 4-letter words. You guys know me, that's how that goes. And also, I think using the expletives helps me heal in some kind of way. And I just want to highlight the things that people don't think about with trauma. I think with everything that was talked about yesterday, everybody is like, yeah, of course, trauma, right? Kaylee's story, Tennille talking, April, Carol Bannon's, like everybody with their trauma experiences and traumatic grief, so much, right? And a lot of those make sense when we say them out loud, that somebody would be like, yeah, of course they're traumatic. And I think a lot of things I'm going to say, people are not going to consider that they were traumatic. And this is why complex PTSD gets overlooked. And it's not quite legitimized yet. And confusing and difficult for people to maybe engage and interact with somebody with complex PTSD. And because of this, it is why I have joined with some other networks, including Integrate Trauma Informed Network, to level up and elevate trauma-informed care in all places and spaces, not just in clinical offices. And I'm really passionate about that because I need that. I am a person who needs trauma-informed care in all places, in all spaces. And it doesn't exist. And because of that, I've incurred a lot more damage in my life, and due to those traumas getting dismissed and validated again and again and again with whatever rhetoric or narrative is pervasive but doesn't apply to me, and my situation. So I was looking back at what I wrote for my description today, and this is what I wrote. In this talk, I'll discuss what it's like being a person living with CPTSD and how complex PTSD developed for me during childhood and undergoing developmental trauma from my primary caretakers in my family. How it has been discounted and invalidated throughout my entire life, and what it means to have landed on a diagnosis that makes sense and find a therapist that gets it and truly begin the healing journey I should have started 20 years ago, but didn't know I needed to. So I wore my pink today because hot pink is my color, and it's what makes me feel confident and like ready to go. So I wore my pink today so that my, strong alter ego can come out as I move through some of this vulnerable material. So I will do a little disclaimer. I'm going to give some details about my own trauma experiences, not tons, but some, about what I went through. So just kind of fair warning. But I am trauma informed, so I am also mindful of not re-traumatizing people with my own talk, and I will do my very best with that. But I also want to have the real talk conversation about this. So let me just give a little bit about complex PTSD from where I sit as a licensed clinical social worker, a practicing psychotherapist, and this being one of the main disorders, responses, symptoms of things that I treat in my practice with adults. So complex PTSD is more likely to develop after repeated or chronic series of abusive or hurtful incidents lasting months or even years, especially during childhood. Symptoms of complex PTSD tend to be more severe and longer lasting than PTSD. So those are kind of some of the main differences there. PTSD is usually diagnosed like post a traumatic event, and the way that the diagnosis works with the criteria is that it is up to 6 months after the event. So if you are still experiencing difficulties in function due to a traumatic experience past 6 months, we are now beyond a PTSD diagnosis, and we are moving into a complex PTSD diagnosis because it is more pervasive and long lasting. So there's that piece. Some examples of what is maybe considered repeated or chronic series of abusive or hurtful incidents are long-term childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, and or emotional abuse, neglect, long-term domestic violence, living with a person who is in active substance misuse or addiction, being a victim of human or sex trafficking, being a victim of a cult or other coercive control groups, war, frequent community violence, prolonged domestic violence, including emotional and psychological abuse, such as gaslighting, torture, genocide, slavery. Again, a lot of those things you would say, yeah, okay, duh, trauma, Sarah. But I'm going to hit on the emotional, psychological abuse pieces, because I think that our eyes are wide open to the physical things that happen to people and that being traumatic. And there's a lot of like shutting the door and closing our eyes on this other stuff and saying very invalidating and dismissive things like it's not that bad, or it's not as bad as physical abuse or sexual abuse. And just all that is faulty, and it is harmful to a survivor of trauma if you say that to them. And I cannot tell you how many times somebody has said that to me in my life, because, my parents didn't like hit me or beat me every day, then it couldn't have been that bad. And I'm here to tell you it was that bad. And the effect has been incredible in my life. And a lot of it really just coming into view in the last like 2 to 3 years for me. So some symptoms of complex PTSD versus regular PTSD, if that's what we're going to say, is greater intrapersonal strife. So this means just like greater issues, difficulty, upset, heartache in interpersonal relationships. One of the biggest things about complex PTSD is it almost exclusively happens within relationships with other people. That's how it gets to be chronic. And or in situations like coercive control and war and slavery. If you do not have control for a long time and it's an oppressive or abusive environment, then it is considered chronic and then likely or could develop into CPTSD. So with this greater interpersonal strife comes more negative perception of themselves, may feel shame and have a sense that they are different from everyone else, experience more volatile or chaotic personal relationships, greater emotional dysfunction. For example, they can be more prone to rage, more likely than those with PTSD to engage in impulsive, risky, or self-destructive behavior. So if we go on to like break that down a little bit more, someone experiencing complex PTSD may struggle to control their anger. Me, rage out person. I am a rage out when my trauma gets triggered. And in the past, I've had like almost zero control over it. Like it's like I've described it as like I see red and like I'm just getting hit with like bolts of lightning like through my system. Everything is bright and like I don't know what's happening, and it's just rage coming out. That's one symptom, I guess we could kind of say. Someone experiencing complex PTSD may make self-destructive decisions, have low self-esteem, find it difficult to trust others or find intimacy in relationships, generally feel guilt, hopelessness, worthlessness, or despair, may be highly reactive to minor stressors, have violent outbursts, engage in reckless self-destructive behavior, may be emotionally numb, unable to experience pleasure or positive emotions, believe that they are flawed or worthless, feel deep guilt or shame because they blame themselves for falling victim to their trauma or for failing to protect others who experienced it, and may have suicidal thoughts. That's a lot of internal stuff. That's a lot of internal battle. That's a lot of what's wrong with me. I can't function the way other people do in the world. I can't have relationships the way other people do in the world. What is wrong with me that I can't get my needs met? I can't be loved and seen the way that I need to. And it all roots back into childhood trauma is where it started. Now, for me, the story is interesting because I knew I wanted to be a therapist pretty early, like in high school. So when I started college, I was sort of well on the way into the mental health treatment world. And so that also kind of meant I early on accessed mental health treatment for myself and my issues. When I left to go to college, I knew my family system wasn't normal, let's say, but I didn't realize how damaging it actually was. And then halfway through college, I experienced the most traumatic death, I guess we'll say, one of the most traumatic things of my life. And when I was 20 years old, and in the summer in between my sophomore and my junior year of college, my 22-year-old brother on his first tour in Iraq was killed in action. And it was a huge shock to all of us, and it was devastating. And I will never, ever forget the day that they came and knocked on our front door. And that is the demarcation line in my life of like things before that and things after that. So I sort of did all of my, initial therapy and healing work around that traumatic death. And like Carol was talking about yesterday, I was in serious and severe grief for at least 2 years. It was rough. It was difficult. So I'm thinking this is the trauma, right? So I do a lot of work around this, and some other stuff happens, after I turn 20, and I'm going to get to that. But it really took a lot of issues in relationships, including my current relationship with my spouse, to I guess kind of have all the pieces come together. So I'm a person that has been in therapy for like 20 years, and I'm just starting to do this work in the last couple. So let me also say for people out there, like, you could be in therapy and not addressing your trauma. You know, it can be buried down in there, and that's okay. You know, like, keep going to work on the other stuff that you're working on, but just know that we might not be hitting it, especially if you're not feeling the kinds of relief or living the life that you want. And eventually that's sort of what was happening with me, but to such a gross degree that I had been under so much stress and duress that I was a mess. I had many physical problems. My hair was falling out. I had a severe case of shingles and nerve pain that lasted for a year when I was 36. And now I have like permanent nerve damage on my right side. All of this I know is due to trauma. And I won't get into all the effects trauma's had for me, because I really want to talk about what was trauma for me. And part of me sharing this today is part of my healing story. I am smack dab in the middle of my healing journey. I listen to everybody's talk and they sound so positive. And I am that for you. Know that. Like, if I'm your therapist or your coach, Jason knows this, other people know me know this, I am your hype man all day, but I am not that person for myself. And I want to be the voice for everybody out there who's like, I don't feel good about it. I'm not healed. There's not a brighter side. I don't see the silver lining, because I'm with you, my friend. It has been a long, hard road to even start on the healing journey, let alone go through this. I am not done yet, and I am still really bitter a lot of days. So I say that for everybody else that's in that place. If you are not in a positive place yet, that is okay. It is part of the process. And I already told you guys, I'm one that rages out. So moving beyond like rage and anger and getting to some of the other emotions is work. It's work for me. I'm so much more empowered and productive when I'm angry. But that also keeps stress living in my body and causing a lot of problems. So I'm going to list lots of things. Hang with me, guys. Okay. And then I'm going to wrap up. Don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm going to wrap up with what I'm doing to heal. So chronic trauma for me, my story, and the negative impact. So I'm going to do this in sort of chronological chunks. Before birth, so before I was born, what trauma was already in my family? Intergenerational trauma, generation after generation experiencing trauma and never healing from it, therefore passing it and its chronic stress responses down to children. Stressed, unhealed, emotionally immature, and unaware parents. Parents living overseas, dad gone a lot for missions and training, sometimes in other countries. Living in a hostile region. My dad was in the Army, and me and one of my older brothers were born in Germany during the Cold War in the early 80s. So this was before the fall, before the wall came down. We were in West Germany and not East Germany, but it was still not the greatest environment over there at that time, which plays a part into the stress of my mom when she was pregnant with me, which started pretty much priming me for a lot more stress and trauma. So those things before birth. Age 0 to 6. My mother was left to fly solo with 3 young kids, frequently in a foreign country. There are stories told of rioters in the streets and my mom hiding me and my brothers like in an attic when my dad would have been gone. There was little attention or affection and 0 attunement. We haven't talked about it a lot here. I know Jason has mentioned in some of his other, some of our other shows and promoting this, but as I go through this, I guess I'll say this. My mom and my mom's side of the family are all severe narcissists and unhealed, unaware ones. So I grew up with a narcissistic parent. And with another very passive parent who let the narcissistic parent pretty much do everything. And and if anybody has had an experience with a narcissistic person or relationship, you know how damaging it is. So try to imagine how damaging it is when that's the person raising you. A lot of negativity, very cold. There was no warmth, love, hugs in my house ever, pretty much. And that's like my starting point. So still from age 0 to 6, I had 4 moves before the age of 6, all either from a different country or a different state. Because like I said, my dad was in the Army. There was often comparison to my brother, the one that's just above me, the middle one. He was the favorite child, and it was very obvious throughout our entire lives. I was always being told I was too sensitive, too emotional. I had early exposure to sexual content and graphic material in terms of TV shows and movies. There's physical fighting with my brothers and my friends, and physical fights encouraged by my brothers when I'm like little, like 4 or 5 years old. Blame and punishment when I made a mistake. There was no learning or explaining from my parents. No one ever apologized for hurting anyone else in my family. Corporal punishment was used often, meaning I was spanked or hit with a spoon or hit with a belt. And we had these ridiculous and rigid rules. One of them was we had to chew our food 20 times before we could swallow. For a long time, years. This was like a rule when we sat at the dinner table. No explanation. From age 6 to 18, another move to a new place, probably several. Often feeling left out by friends. This is when I'm young. 6, 7, 8, 9. And not validated or comforted by my parents. It was often met with like, well, get over it, or what did you do? Or, I mean, there was just no empathy or space. I was often told, do as I say, not as I do, which was a confusing and contradictory message. I was told I was too sensitive, toughen up, stop being a baby. Why are you crying? Often. I was hit by my mother and had physical fights with my brother, often laughed at by their family members when these like physical altercations were happening, or not cared for, protected, or even checked on by my father afterwards. I experienced several sexual assaults or unwanted sexual touch as a teenager by other teenagers and adult men. I was blamed for my sexual assaults by my mother when she found out by eavesdropping on a phone conversation. Several friendship breakups and random exclusion from friend groups with no explanation, which was always really confusing for me. My mother's constant message was, you're fat and you would be so pretty if you would just lose weight, for pretty much my entire life. So I grew up never thinking I was attractive and constantly thinking about that and being worried about that. I was not celebrated for achievements. Achieving was expected and not acknowledged. I was belittled, put down, made fun of by my parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. I was blamed for all the family problems, specifically blamed for my mother's chronic illness. I was not treated the same as the golden child. There was lots of family competition rather than camaraderie. I was bullied and threatened at school, followed. My car was keyed. My house was egged. I'd been chased. Now, from age 18 to now, I worked at a restaurant kind of all through high school, and then I was home from college in my hometown, and was really close with the owners. I used to babysit their kids. They only had one car. I would go pick the owner up sometimes and bring him to work because it was really near to the restaurant, things like that. So it was more than like I just had a job at this family restaurant. Like it was a small family restaurant. Everybody kind of knew each other. And so it was owned by a couple, man, woman, married. They had two young girls, and the wife, the woman at the restaurant where I worked, and I'd been there maybe like 3-ish years by the time this happened. She completed suicide by firearm. It was on the news. She was missing for 9 days. And I was called by a coworker late at night, right before it all kind of dropped. And that was my first funeral that I ever went to. Right when I finished high school, my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And as that happened, she and my dad just became more and more absent. I was in a physically and sexually abusive relationship for 18 months, and he moved me to California. I was isolated from everyone I knew on the other side of the country. It all kind of crashed and burned in a Lifetime movie kind of way. And and he had overdosed and tried to kill me and then tried to kill himself. And it was a whole situation with police and ambulance and TDO order and like the whole nine when I lived in California, 24, 25 years old and didn't know anybody. My mom attempted or threatened suicide many times in the years after my brother died. So when my brother was killed in Iraq, there was a lot of family discord after that. Really selfish mother. It was pretty much all about her, not anybody else's grief. My father was distracted with my mom's illness and all of that and catering to her. My brother lived in a different state far away. I didn't really have any support, emotional care for my traumatic loss and grief and pain. And I was 20 years old. When my mom would threaten suicide, I would often ask her, don't you want to be around? I haven't even graduated college yet or got married. My oldest brother and got married. And she would repeatedly say, no, I don't care. I don't care to see any of that. I just want to die and be with my brother because he was the favorite. Oh, I left that out. So the favorite child is the one that was killed in Iraq, which just meant pretty much my mom's life was over after that. My mom died a short 3 years after my brother died. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at 48 and died at 53. That was in 2009. After my brother died, there was emotional and physical abandonment by my mom died by my remaining family. My brother and my father continued to invalidate or dismiss my experiences, my trauma, treat me like a child, discrediting me and sometimes ignoring me, but expecting me to do all the work in their relationships with them. And that is true to this day. As an adult, I've had 3 serious long-term romantic partnerships, all with drug addicts. Did not know they were addicts at the time I started the relationships, but interesting how we just walk into all of that. I married an addict, and 1 year into our relationship, he relapsed for 3 years, slow burn, 3 years of use, and then went to rehab for the 3rd time in his life. And that caused a bunch of issues for us. My spouse remains emotionally unavailable due to his own trauma, and I struggle with codependency due to mine and our opposite attachment styles. And I've been burned by about every church I have been a part of. They either have not showed up for me or in some other way judged me, ostracized me, and made me feel terrible about myself, including recently when my spouse and I needed support for our marriage and we were separated. We were told by a pastor and his wife they would be there for us. And then when it wasn't really convenient or neat and pretty for them, they just kind of dropped us and ghosted us. So it's another pain and trauma that I've incurred. Now, that is not even everything I've experienced, and that's 40 things from my own life and my nearly 40 years on this earth. And a lot of these don't sound like they would be trauma, but this is what chronic emotional and psychological abuse and neglect looks like. It's constantly being undermined. It's constantly being invalidated. It's constantly being told you're too sensitive, you're a baby, nobody wants to hear it. I've never been seen. I've never been heard. I've never been loved the way that I needed to. And it all started with my parents and their inability to parent well. And honestly, all the damage that they have done. So as with all of that, what was born out of that are a lot of faulty core beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. And I'm too much, I'm too sensitive, I'm too fat, I'm too messy. It's really difficult self-view to walk around with feeling like I'm too much and not enough at the same time. Feels like a lose-lose, like I can't ever be myself. It's just wrong. And all of the things that I've done, as a result of my trauma, I'm not doing on purpose. I'm doing things on pattern for safety and survival, but it has caused a lot of interpersonal turmoil. I'm always on guard, especially around people. I'm constantly scanning people to determine how they feel about me. Are they going to abandon me? Are they going to be there for me if things get tough? If my behavior is confusing or difficult to deal with, are they going to validate me if I share my feelings, fears, or needs? This is exhausting, period. It happens all the time in my brain, period. I don't want this. It's something I have to deal with. Every interpersonal experience is stressful for me. Every interaction I have with people is stressful for me. At least it has been. I'm slowly turning the tides. And lastly, I've had chronic and debilitating insomnia for almost 20 years. It's slowly getting better with some new medication, but I probably didn't get more than 4 to 6 hours of sleep, and that's pretty generous, in one night for like 15 years straight. And so there's a huge toll that lack of sleep can take on you as well. So that's all the not so good stuff. And I really hope that it speaks to somebody out there who's like, I didn't have trauma, but I had one of those things or many of those things happen, because yes, you did. And it probably changed the way you view yourself in the world and you don't realize it. And that was true for me till about 2 or 3 years ago. And then it finally all started to come into full view. So like I said, I'm knee deep in my trauma healing journey. And so what that looks like for me is therapy. I've been in therapy since I was about 18 or 19 years old, many different therapists. The therapist I've had for 8 years. He's amazing. He's trauma informed. He's probably the first therapist I've really felt comfortable with, and we are doing some good work, and I'm super grateful for him. Self-reflection, self-awareness, enough cannot be said about this. And it is really hard to do that when you feel like you're the one who's been hurt all the time. But you still have to do this in some sort of safe space. Body and physiology awareness, reading, lots of reading, books, articles. I'll give you a list of some right here at the end. I've had to limit my circle and socialization. Currently, I only feel safe with about 4 people in real life. So I'm not doing very much currently to sort of protect myself as I move through healing. I spend a lot more time on activities I enjoy, like crafts, drawing, music, going to concerts, traveling. I get outside every day, even in the winter. I engage in healthy movement for my body for at least 40 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. I do regular stretching, yoga, and breath work. Setting tons of personal boundaries, hence the small circle. I prioritize sleep over everything else, which sometimes I have to block off like 12 hours to make sure that somewhere in there I can maybe get 8. I take lots of medications, vitamins, and supplements. I'm learning to walk away when I'm activated, formerly known as triggered, instead of rage out, which is huge progress for me. I express my feelings of loneliness and disappointment more often than I express feelings of anger and frustrations. And then, of course, I spend a lot of time with my dogs, and my dogs mean a lot to me, and they make me laugh, and they make my world go around. And I'm a proud dog mama, and so they bring me lots of joy and are a huge part of my healing. So that's me. I think I ran over a little bit, so sorry, everyone, but I kind of wanted to get all of that in there and just, you're not alone. And then I also need to hear that, because I'm often sharing from the place of experiencing. And then I am the therapist for others who have experience. So I am the holder of other people's trauma as well. So probably the amount that I'm walking around with is like exponential, which does require me at this point in recognizing I have to focus a lot of my other time on myself so that I have capacity to do the work that I do and capacity for my own healing journey. But it's happening slowly but surely. And the final thing I want to leave everybody with is like, what did you read, Sarah? So there have been some books that have been really pivotal in affirming my experience and my story and the negative impact that my trauma has had on me. What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry. This is written by him between a conversation between he and Oprah. This is amazing. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. The next really great one was Trauma, the Invisible Epidemic, How Trauma Works and How We Can Heal from It by Paul Conti. Paul Conti is the psychiatrist for Lady Gaga. This book is also amazing. He and Bruce Perry are both psychiatrists and researchers. So a lot, if not all of their work is rooted in empirical research, which you guys know me, I love my science. That makes sense to me. A Guide to Managing Unhealthy Family Relationships, Drama Free by Nedra Glover-Tawwab. This is amazing. I did a training with her. This book has been so helpful in setting boundaries with my toxic and narcissistic family members and understanding the things that they do are crossing my boundaries. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Emily Gibson. Also an amazing read if this was your parents. And finally, for all the individuals born as women in this world, if you have not, hear me say loud and clear, read this book. Come as you are. The Surprising New Science That Will Transform Your Sex Life by Emily Nagoski, who's a sex educator, professor, tons of science. You guys know me and my science. Amazing. Transformational of my own journey with myself and my own sexuality and growing up in a sex negative culture and a patriarchal culture where women's sexuality has been compared to men's sexuality, and it's just not the same. So for all the trauma that I've experienced, this has been huge. Those are my recommendations for books. I'm a therapist and I'm in therapy. So I've heard tons of coaches and I love what they're doing. But if you are having unhealed trauma and you cannot function in life, do not rule out therapy. I understand there's stigma, there's this and that, but honestly, I'm just like them and I practice just like them. And I see my clients get to transformational change and healing, and I am doing the same thing in my therapy process. But that's not the only thing I use. I use holistic things. I use breath work. I use breath and body movement. I use art and creativity. I use time in nature and outside and fresh air. All kinds of things also come with that. And therapy is like my home base for all of those other things. And then being able to process and reflect what is working for me and what isn't. So I'll leave you all with one of the things I always tell my clients, and that I do my best to try to apply to my own life, although it's hard to do and easy to say, and that is focus on what is instead of what isn't. And sometimes it might have been just one very small thing, like my dogs, but that was the thing to get me through. So you're not alone. Healing is available to you. Focus on what is, not what isn't, and find the support you need, no matter how long it takes or how small you have to shrink your circle until you heal. It's there somewhere. Mine, a lot, is Jason Wilson and the Circle of Friends Club. And that's why I have joined this mission with him, because I've experienced so much loneliness as a result of my own trauma and so much judgment and dismissal that not only is my brain in this because it's what I do for work, but my whole heart is in this because I feel this in my clients as well as with myself. I know what they're going through. I know what these other people are going through. So I have a huge heart for it because I experience it. So join us here. I'm committed to mental wellness for myself and everybody else in a huge way now. And we would love to support you. And I feel supported by this community. And for that, I'm truly grateful. Thanks for having me today.
What a powerful speech from Sarah. I just want you to know again, Sarah, that, we love you. We appreciate you. You're always pouring into us everywhere that you are. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, it doesn't matter what platform it is. This lady is tireless with what she does. And I so appreciate it. And I know everybody else does too. So we're going to move on to our next speaker for today, Johan Tokre. But before we do that, another word from our sponsor. Susanna Dawn is a motivational speaker and author. She's the founder of Move Beyond Boxes and Shine. Having entered 2022 with a total reinvention, she now looks at life and business from a vantage point set beyond labels, beyond boxes, those places in which our fears work hard to confine us, trying to keep us from seeing how we are so much more than boxes and labels could ever express. So again, our next speaker is Johan Tokre from Peru, my Peruvian brother. Johan Tokre is a neuroscientist and Army veteran that is passionate about prevention work in the field of mental health, which includes suicide prevention and intervention, and working with individuals seeking positive change in their lives through a shift in mindset. Welcome to the stage, Johan.
All right. All right, so I made it official. I found the iconic hat here, and it's not that I'm losing my hair. I have hair. I just like it. It's my deployment hat. So first of all, good morning and good afternoon to those that are on the East Coast. Jason, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be part of the Freedom Fight Expo, set free from PTSD. Man, what an amazing speech by Sarah. I'm highly honored actually to be sharing the stage with her and all the other amazing people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what I call divine conspiritual narcissism, the dark side of the psychedelic revolution. It's I know it's a big title, and I'll be explaining it as I move along. So what I'd like to do, or the purpose of this, basically to share with you what neuroscience knows about the effects of psychedelics, but bring it to in a practical sense. How can we use what we know, and how can we apply it? And the intent with that is to not only show you the data or share with you information, but what does that look like in a non-clinical setting? And because it's a non-clinical setting, that means it's an uncontrolled environment and it's different effects. And I'll be talking about that. So because it's a non-clinical setting, I cannot approach this clinically, and I cannot approach this scientifically per se. So I'm going to take the spiritual approach, and I'll talk about what I mean by that as well. And before I get started, I'm going to give you some definitions so that we can start forming the context of divine conspiritual narcissism. So for practical purposes, we're going to define psychedelics as a mind-altering substance, divine, connected with a god or like a god. By the way, you're going to see me doing this. It's not that I'm a news anchor, but I decided to structure this on paper so I don't get lost. So divine, connected with a god or like a god. Entheogen. It's a term that was coined to kind of like take the psychedelic word and move it away from historical context and apply a more spiritual use of the word psychedelic. Conspirituality, two words in one. Conspiracy and spirituality. Conspiracy, sometimes it can get to the point where you develop a little bit of like paranoia, like the world is against you, your family is against you, goes beyond thinking whether we went to the moon or not or whatever. And then spirituality, how can we cope with all these different conspiracies? And we start applying the spirituality to it. So that's spirituality. Religion, belief and worship of a god or gods or any such system of belief or worship. Spirituality, so literally it involves deep feelings and beliefs of a religious nature rather than physical. But in this sense, spirituality is about the sense of connection to something greater than one's self, and whether it's God, nature, or oneself, basically. And then God, spirit or being that has great power, strength, knowledge, etc., and that can affect nature or the lives of people. Narcissism, personality trait that involves a grandiose sense of self-importance, lack of empathy, and a need for admiration. And a term that I usually hear among the psychedelic movement, or when using psychedelics in a non-clinical setting, highest self. Now we go all the way to the 1700s and see how it started, but I'm going to focus on Blavatsky, who founded the Theosophical movement. So it's formally defined as the Atma, the inseparable ray of the universe and oneself. It is the God above, more than within us. So the Atma is actually a term borrowed from Hinduism, and it refers to the self-existent essence of human beings, the observing pure consciousness or witness consciousness. And of course, there's a strong link or connection between the New Age movement and psychedelics, and most New Age literature defines the higher self as an extension of the self to a godlike state. And this higher self is essentially an extension of the world, worldly self. With the perspective, basically, the New Age text teaches that the self creates its own reality when in union with the higher self. So those are the definitions to start creating the context of what I'm going to talk about. So next, I'm going to talk about the effects of psychedelics and which brain receptors. I'm mainly going to focus on DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and psilocybin, which are two of the most common psychedelics that are used in a non-clinical setting, in ceremonies, retreats, and such. So for one, DMT and psilocybin, they both act or affect the 2-alpha receptor, or the 5-HT2 alpha, which is basically believed to be responsible for the hallucinogenic and psychedelic effects of both. The only difference is that with DMT, it's short-lasting. Psilocybin is longer acting. And usually, behaviorally, when either DMT or psilocybin is consumed, it tends to induce like an altered state of consciousness. Like usually you see the changes in perception, in mood, cognition. And of course, when you go through that can definitely lead into like increased introspection and emotion, or what you feel as emotional breakthroughs. So it's important to know how these substances affect and react and into what receptors, because then you tend to show that through behavior, thought, or even speech. Okay. So one thing about those two substances, DMT and psilocybin, is that when you consume them, it's going to disrupt certain brain networks. Think about when you consume psilocybin DMT, you tend to, your sense of like space, time, and self gets disrupted. I'll give you an example. So, for example, 25 milligrams of psilocybin, that's like 0.2 grams. It's a dosage high enough to cause hallucinations, right? And the one thing that we know about neuroscience when we do all these different studies or clinical research is that if we understand how something breaks, we start to understand how something works. And I'm basically quoting here from Dr. Dozenbach, who's a neuroscientist that decided to actually take psilocybin to see what it was like. And so this is basically what we experience, the alteration of consciousness and all the different perceptions. Now, when we look at the clinical data, whether it's imaging, right, or the outcomes of the different researches or studies that we do, we see that all the different regions of the brain that show blood flow or that light up. And what we know is that when we consume these two substances is that it disrupts that network. Our brain is basically synchronized. When you look at imaging of the brain and you're thinking, you're saying something, you see different areas light up, synchronized, because, if you're speaking, your bronchus area, and you're listening, your wordnix area is going to light up. If you're thinking, your frontal part lights up. And so it's kind of like synchronized. What psychedelics do is that it disrupts that network. So think about, I'll give you the example or analogy of a gas engine. You require intake, compression, power, and then exhaust, right? So those are 4 different steps, and it's synchronized. So as your engine is running, you have, intake, compression, power, exhaust, intake, compression, power, exhaust. If that things get out of whack, it's no longer synchronized, your engine is going to start malfunctioning. Okay, so that's basically what happens in our brains. It gets out of sync and all that, and this is why we see all these different alterations in terms of perception. Okay, so what we see is that during psilocybin or DMT, these populations of neurons that are normal in synchrony become out of sync. So the brain kind of like I don't want this to sound negative. The brain starts to kind of like fall apart. It has like a structure and order. And when we take those substances, there is no order. Everything just starts firing at the same time. And that shows us how plastic basically the brain is. When that happens, the what we call the default network starts become active, and the default network is basically this region that gets activated when you start daydreaming. When you start daydreaming, you no longer are aware of the present moment. Sometimes, if you ever caught yourself like daydreaming and somebody starts calling your name and calling your name, and you just like not hearing until whoop, you wake up and you're like, I'm sorry, what? You start daydreaming and your default network kicks in. So basically that is what we see in terms of how these psychedelics affect the brain. And it's important to understand that when we're thinking about consuming these psychedelics. One big difference is to be in a clinical setting where there are controlled variables, and another thing is to use that in a non-controlled setting or environment where really you don't know the exact dosage or intensity of what you're going to be consuming. So it's extremely different, and we got to be cautious about that. So now it's not that I'm talking negatively about psychedelics in general, because there are some promising studies that show that they're effective in the treatment of PTSD, depression, and such. But that's in a clinical setting, mind you. So I'm focusing here on the non-clinical setting and the usage of that non-clinical environment. So as with everything, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about what I call the dark side of psychedelics. And although promising, like I said, it comes with potential risk when you're not consuming them in a controlled environment. So, for example, a lot of the people that I've worked with that consume psychedelics, they usually do it in ceremonies, whether it's an ayahuasca ceremony or a mushroom ceremony and all that. At the beginning, I gave you some definitions because what happens, especially in spirituality, because what happens is that due to the stigma of mental health, people don't want to be labeled as having a particular condition, or they don't want to be labeled as being someone that takes medication. So when they try to remove themselves from that label and then use psychedelics as a substance that will help them, let's say, strengthen their spirituality, and so then they start attending these ceremonies or making ceremonies in order to have a spiritual approach to taking those substances. But that has its risks, because if you don't understand the effects of the substance that you're taking, you put yourself at risk. Unfortunately, the experience that I have in working with people that I've witnessed and that I know of in the past few years, a lot of a lot of the people that I've interacted with or that have contacted me have actually gone through some sort of sexual trauma or have experienced sexual misconduct from the people that are actually administering, facilitating those psychedelic substances. And the reason is quite simple, because the effects that those substances have on your brain, it prompts you to being open to new experiences. And when I talk about the stigma of mental health and the people that usually go out looking for these substances, they have gotten to a place where they really cannot function anymore. They see an interruption in the way that they function on a daily basis, and they're looking for the way out. They usually feel stigmatized because they don't want any sort of label assigned to them, whether it's a diagnosis or not. It can be something as simple as depression, or something more complex like PTSD or complex PTSD, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. So they don't feel too comfortable about getting labeled or receiving a diagnosis. So they go and they either self-administer or they look for a facilitator to administer for them. And of course, when they consume these psychedelics, because of the effects on the brain, it's going to make them feel good. But there's a difference between feeling good and healing. Feeling good can be a part of healing, but it doesn't mean that when you feel good, you're actually resolving the different situations or issues that you may be having or you may have had that remain unresolved. You don't heal the trauma just by merely taking a substance. It can help you, of course, but it's not just about taking a substance and then boom, you're healed. And one of the dangers about the psychedelics is, for example, DMT has a short action of 20 to 25 minutes. Now that window of 20 to 25 minutes, it's kind of like you getting a reset. Now you're getting a reset and you have somebody that's helping you to rewrite a whole different story that is not your own. You're starting to create all these neural connections and you're starting to create new memories. Psilocybin is the same thing, except it's longer acting. And it's important that at least for the clinical part, when you do psilocybin, there's an integration work that is done with the therapist to help you get over the different things that you may be going through. When you do it non-clinically, it's not just about getting a good trip or feeling good. And if you're not doing it with a professional, what's happening is that you're rewriting a story that you may not remember fully. And by nature, our brain starts to fill in what doesn't know. And this is dangerous because I have worked with people that they really couldn't explain why they're acting the way that they're acting. And so they have somebody else tell them, it's probably because you went through sexual trauma. It's probably because you were bullied. And so they take that suggestion and they start writing a story that, yes, I did get bullied. Yes, I did go through sexual trauma. And then they start adopting those new memories that didn't exist before. So it can be dangerous in that sense. Whole different thing if it's done clinically with a therapist. So one of the another danger that you have when you use psychedelics in a non-controlled environment is that you can end up with psychological distress. Your body's going to respond physiologically to high dosages of anything. Look, when we have high dosages of just the monoamines like dopamine, serotonin in our brain, we have those high concentrations. We tend to respond physiologically and with such behavior that we can't control sometimes. And this is why sometimes we have to, when you have a low concentration of, for example, serotonin, you're going to get those inhibitors so that you can remain that concentration there and improve your mood. But when you have too much of that, that's when you need something to degrade that. So imagine you having a low concentration of serotonin, and then you get some substance that really spikes up the levels. You're going to react. Another danger is what's called HPPD, or hallucinogen persisting in perception, which basically persistent changes in perception such as visual disturbance long after the drug has been metabolized. So that can remain. It's rare, but it has happened. And then reactivation of flashbacks. Believe it or not, when people go through those ceremonies and they go through a negative experience such as sexual assault, they tend to relive the flashback of having been in that ceremony, and that becomes a new memory for them. So it becomes very traumatic. And then, of course, look, the big difference in how people react when consuming those psychedelics is you can tell which people have a condition and which people don't. For the most part, the people that don't have a condition, for example, diagnosed like a mental condition or mental illness, they will take the substance and they will react like with the visual hallucinations and things like that. But for the most part, they'll be okay. Now, the people that have a mental condition, for example, let's say that you have undiagnosed schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, they will react in a very, very negative manner. Their increased heart rate, they'll see demonic visions, things like that. Another thing is that when you have personality traits such as narcissism and you take those substances, more than it will actually help you remove yourself from the ego or disconnect the ego, it will actually validate your feelings of grandeur. And so you start to become more apathetic, less empathetic. And so it tends to validate what you think about yourself. And you start adopting these different mindsets that you are extremely conscious and aware while everybody else just needs your help, needs that boost from your own creative and divine being so that they can achieve consciousness and that they can be aware. So you put yourself in a godlike status. And this is why I was giving you the definition of what this is like. Psychedelic use in a non-clinical setting is basically like a religion. So by definition, a religion is a set of beliefs. So it falls also under the psychedelic movement in terms of what it is by definition with their practices. So it puts you in this godlike status where everybody else needs your help and you know more and they know less. And that's what happens when you have those personality traits such as narcissism. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that I've interacted with, that I know of, and the things that I've witnessed, sometimes they start with false narratives. So they can be all these different, and I don't want to put everybody under an umbrella, but sometimes it can be all these different coaches that tell you that they're going to get you to your to connect to your highest self, but they themselves are actually in financial distress. They are not doing well, and of course you don't know that because you are not where they stand. But if you've had the experience that I had, where I'm actually um, interacting with them and I see them go into trying to coach somebody or trying to help someone, and they themselves fall into this kind of like an abyss of grandeur. And I'm not talking about, for example, like a therapist that they themselves are going through a rough time and then they are actually helping other people. I'm talking something way more than that. I'm talking about people that are not really doing well, and they're in an abyss, and they're telling you all these different things, and they're facilitating um, and administering psychedelics to someone that actually needs the help. So it can be very, very dangerous. It can definitely impact your faith, because imagine if we can all be influenced under no influence of any psychedelics at all by a sales pitch or what have you. How much more do you think we're going to be influenced when we're under the influence of a psychedelic, which makes us be more open to new experiences? And it is in that opening that some facilitators take advantage. And this is where the sexual abuse comes into play. So it can get extremely dangerous. I'm all for using psychedelics in a clinical setting, but facilitating and administering psychedelics outside of a non-clinical setting, that can get very, very uh, dangerous. So this is, again, a person that has those narcissistic traits, they will take these psychedelics, and they will validate again their feeling of grandeur. And I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, that fall into the psychedelics, and they don't have a physical dependence on it, but they do have a psychological dependence on it because it feels basically good. So that's kind of like the dark side of it. It can really affect your faith. And the one thing that comes into mind is, when we put ourselves above everything that is called God. This is the message that is put out there among these different ceremonies about connecting to your highest self. And this thing can be dangerous because it can affect your faith. The people that I've interacted, it has affected their faith, and it makes them psychologically dependent on that, so that week after week they're either getting a dose of microdosing of psilocybin, or they're doing any others psychedelics, and they just go into that cycle. And the results are basically very similar among the group of people that consume psychedelics outside of a clinical setting. Financial stability, they live in different places, they cannot hold a job, or they have this negative view about having a job, and they're looking for this freedom or this utopia that in the current reality does not exist. So things can get so bad for them that they rather not be in the present reality and take these different substances so that they can go away from their reality in a sort of escapism. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you guys about. This is one of those topics that it doesn't get me followers, it doesn't get me famous. On the contrary, it gets me some sort of negative comments. Sometimes I get email, how can I speak like that about psychedelics? But this is what happens. This is what happens outside of a non-clinical setting. And I've seen it here in the state where I live, in Florida, in the cities close by. I've experienced it, I've witnessed it. I've worked with people that have been coming out of those psychedelic movements. I've seen it across the states, and I've seen it internationally. I've seen it in Peru, in my own native countries, retreats using psychedelics. and taking advantage of women through sexual abuse or sexual assault. But more than the fear of what people may say, I respond to a higher authority. I have that responsibility of responding to God in this, when it comes to this. So I don't worry about what the negativity that may come my way when I speak about this subject. It is sensitive, but I have someone higher that I need to respond to. And as a mental health advocate, and having done therapy also, for work in occupational therapy in the Army as well, or mental health in the Army, I see the impact that the irresponsible use, facilitation, and administration of psychedelics can do, not only to the person, but if the person has children, how it affects their children, how it affects the families that they live with. And that is something that needs to change. And we need to be more responsible. If we are one of those that are facilitating or giving those substances, we need to hold ourselves accountable, and keep in mind that this is not about boosting our ego in terms of how much we know and how much we want to be seen as a guru in mental health or psychedelics. This is about the other person. The other person is the one that's suffering. Their families are suffering. Their kids are suffering. So we got to be more responsible into that. And I hope that this message goes to the people that need to see it. And if they're facilitating this responsibly, they need to kind of like be responsible with it and realize that sometimes, even if they're well-meaning, it can do more harm than good. Of course, not everything's bad, but from what I've seen, there's a lot of negative things that come from the irresponsible use of psychedelics, along with it administration and facilitation. So I hope that I've been able to contribute to Freedom Fight Expo. You're more than welcome to connect with me. Jason, I thank you again for the opportunity to be part of the speakers here in this event. And that's pretty much it. That's all I have. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Johan. Every time I hear this, man, it is so fascinating, and I'm sure that everybody listening to that, it's eye-opening as well. So there's so many coercive control groups out there, like my friend Sarah was talking about. This information needs to get out there, and as long as I have something to do about it, you'll have a stage, brother. So thank you so much for what you do, and we appreciate you, man. So we're going to move on to our next speaker. But before we do that, another word from our sponsor. Laurel Weirs is a licensed marriage and family therapist and has been practicing for over 24 years. She is the author of Betrayed, Not Broken, and has been featured in the Chicago Tribune, Military Life magazine, Newsweek, and a contributor to Successful Living and Successful Marriage. She works with first responders, veterans, athletes, high performers, and organizations seeking to cultivate trauma-informed environments. So if you thought Johan Tokre was fascinating, our next speaker, Francesca Graham, that's all I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Here we go. Francesca Graham is the Chief Operations Officer and Chief Advisor with the Walk the Talk Foundation, LLC. Her focus is on legislation and policy, specifically an appropriate restructuring of the Ferris Doctrine. Her awards and honors are commensurate with her sacrifices and years in service to our great nation. Welcome to the stage, Francesca.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Francesca Graham. I really appreciate the short and long introduction, Jason. I especially appreciate the opportunity to join everyone here on a, hopefully wherever you are, a beautiful Saturday. I'm here in Arlington, Virginia, and it's absolutely gorgeous outside, and I can't wait to go for a walk. So who are we? So Walk Talk Foundation, it was started about almost 3 years ago by our president and founder, Ryan Swayze. He's a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel, F-16 pilot. He was serving with the Defense Intelligence Agency as a defense attaché. He reported at least what he saw as some potential wrongdoing where he was stationed in Europe. And the Defense DI's response to that was to, within a week of him, he hadn't even made a formal complaint yet, but within a week of him raising concerns, visited station, removed him from his follow-on assignment, gave him a career-ending eval, and ultimately was sent back to the Air Force. So in legal terms, he was wholeheartedly reprised against. And so taking that experience plus his experience previously serving as an inspector general within the Air Force at a previous assignment, he started the Walk Talk Foundation in January 2022 as a nonprofit to help support currently serving service members as well as former service members who are enduring reprisal, retaliation, restriction, and any of those things within the Department of Defense's administrative process. I joined the team officially in June of this year. I actually just retired from the Army at the end of May of this year, which was kind of exciting. I think I'm 100-something days. I retired as a intelligence officer. And my road to retirement was similar to Ryan's in the sense that I made a complaint and about what I perceived as wrongdoing within my work environment. And within a month and a half of my making a complaint, I had 2 counter investigations launched against me. I was removed from my position. I was given a career-ending performance evaluation, and so my career was over. So I was reprised against as well. And so Ryan reached out to me randomly last year because someone had told him that, hey, there's this random lieutenant colonel in the Pentagon who's having some issues. Maybe you and your foundation could help out. So he reached out to me, and the rest is history. And so I retired because I didn't have a career left in the military, and now I work with the foundation, and I'm incredibly passionate about the work that I do with the foundation. So that's who Ryan and I are. We have a small group of advisors that help us as well. So what is our mission? Our mission is advocacy and advisement of, as I said, currently serving former service members who are enduring reprisal, retaliation, restriction, or really are having to navigate this thing called the administrative punishment and administrative investigation system within the Department of Defense. And then we also help some of the service members in the Department of Homeland Security. And the reason why that's important is you have, within the non-military world, you have a criminal justice system, and you also have a civil law system. And inside of those two systems, there is what is called procedural law, or essentially you have something resembling due process. You have rights within the system. You're afforded legal counsel. Your legal counsel has leverage within the conversations of that system. And for both the civil and the criminal systems, right? Within the military, you have the criminal system, which is court-martial or non-judicial punishment, well, court-martial. And then you have this whole other administrative system that can lead to you being involuntarily administratively separated from the military, absent any sort of due process, absent any sort of real rights within the system. You're not afforded legal counsel. If you do hire a civilian attorney, or if you are able to use an attorney that the military has, one of the judge advocate generals, your attorney does not have any leverage within the system. You have no right to see the evidence being used against you to involuntarily separate you, and you can be involuntarily separated with up to an other than honorable discharge, as well as a reduction in rank, which over the long term is potentially $1 million+ in loss of pay, benefits, including the education GI Bill, as well as Veterans Affairs health benefits. So all this can happen within this administrative system that we very just disingenuously call non-punitive. And so our mission is to help service members currently serving former to navigate this system, having been on the sticky end of the administrative system ourselves. So we have a little bit of experience within it. And then our other major mission is to lobby Congress or advocate to Congress legislation to improve whistleblower laws. And then currently our major project, and the reason why I spoke with Jason about being on this show, is one of our major projects is we recently completed a study in June of 2024, so a few months ago, that took the major conclusion of it is that the major investigatory system within the Department of Defense, the IG, the Inspector General, so the Department of Defense Inspector General, as well as the Service Inspector General, so Army, Navy, Air Force, etc., that investigatory system wherein service members do not have any concept of due process, lawyers don't have leverage, you have no right to see the evidence, that whole system needs to be pulled outside of the military. And the reason why, the major conclusions that the themes that we saw and we've seen over the last 3 years of the foundation, we've advised approximately 400 different service members, and we supported our conclusions with about 40 different case studies. The major themes that we discovered is that, as I've already mentioned, there's a total lack of due process and transparency within this system. There are what I characterize as insurmountable conflicts of interest inside of the system, wherein the inspectors who are allegedly, independent and have integrity and whatnot, they actually work. Their performance evaluations are written by the commanders within which they're doing the inspecting. And so there's a bit of a conflict of interest that's insurmountable both for the commanders as well as for the inspectors generals themselves, where they have to determine, okay, do I do what's right by this inspection, or do I protect my career and protect my evaluation if I'm getting pressure from the command team to take the inspection in a way that that is unethical. Another major conflict, or excuse me, another major issue that we determined, or we found, is that there's a total inadequate lack of training for inspectors generals and the command and point investigating officers. I won't get into all the nuances of that, but basically you have inspectors who either have zero training whatsoever conducting investigations, up to and including, until recently, allegations of sexual harassment, which is, as we've all talked about here, quite sensitive topic, or individuals who are serving in IG offices who receive maybe 2 weeks of training. And so you have people doing investigations across the military who are not actually trained investigators. And the impact of those investigations, again, can lead to involuntary separation with an other than honorable discharge. So the impact to the quality of evidence gathering, all of that is in biases and all these things. It just doesn't match. And then a fourth major implication or theme that we've discovered is a lack of timeliness investigations. There's no statutory requirement for, if you have an investigation for stealing something from the commissary to sexual harassment or fraud, waste, and abuse, there's no statutory timeline. So what we found is that while it makes sense that some investigations take longer than others, especially as you gather more evidence, theoretically, what we found actually what happens is that the investigations become very much personality, popularity contests. So if the commander thinks that the investigation is bogus and likes the person who's under investigation, that investigation can last for 2 weeks and be unsubstantiated. If the commander does not like the person who's under investigation or people, or does not like the complainant, whatever it may be, the investigation can last a year, 2 years, 4 years. And during this entire time, you're in this very dangerous, we'll call it purgatory, where you can't retire, you cannot go to school, your security clearance is probably suspended at some point, you're probably removed from your position, your name is being dragged in the mud by your peers, subordinates, and senior officers and senior non-commissioned officers. And you're isolated, you have a sense of betrayal, and you just don't know. There's such a I forget one of the other presenters, I think Susan, there's such a lack of control, such a lack of knowledge and understanding about what's going on with your life. This thing that military members very much identify with the work that we do. We identify our self-worth with the work that we do. And now you're just in this purgatory that again could last 2 weeks, 4 years. You don't know. And you have no right within the system to argue how long it lasts. And then one of our other themes is what we call the normalization of deviance. And all this feeds into the topic of our discussion today, which is mental health, PTSD, suicide. Before we get to that, though, the one of the other major themes is, our fifth major theme is what we call the normalization of deviance, where there's so many issues with the system. There's so many issues with people in the system. And there's so many violations of statute, law, regulations, that it's normal, and it's people walk past it. And so there's this normalization of deviance where you think, as whether you're a complainant or you're the person who made a complaint or the person who's the subject of an investigation, you think that evidence matters. You think that the regulations matter, or the instructions, or whatever it is within the service. You go into this thing thinking that it matters, that these things matter. And then as you go through the process, depending on your commander, and not all of them are bad, certainly, but there's enough that are, you go through this process, depending on your commander, you discover that evidence doesn't matter. The regulations don't matter. The truth doesn't matter. And so you're just like, well, what, I don't understand. So you make a complaint, and the people receiving the complaint, they're part of this normalization of deviance, and they say, well, no, you're fine. And so all of that leads to, again, the topic that we're here discussing today, which is our sixth major conclusion, theme that we drew from this study that we did, which is the irrefutable link to the military's, the Department of Defense's mental health and suicide epidemic. And don't take our word for it. The DoD itself actually had a study several years ago that showed, I think it was across the services, 28% of the 28 or 26% of the suicides that occurred during that measured period, those service members were actively under an investigation. But what we see is, whether you're, again, a victim or whether you are a complainant, what we see is a term that's used quite a bit, gaslighting. You think the truth matters, it doesn't. Isolation. The second you are under investigation for anything, or even if you're a complainant, the people around you don't want to be around you, because they're afraid to get the funk on themselves. And they're afraid that somehow, I call it the Eye of Sauron from The Lord of the Rings, somehow the Eye of Sauron is going to turn onto them. And they are going to all of a sudden be under investigation, or be involved in an investigation that could somehow damage their career. So you're immediately isolated. You are ostracized. You are more often than not removed from your position. You're often sent, especially if you're a complainant, you're often sent to mental health evaluations involuntarily. And so there's just this pile on a pile on a pile on of, you identify yourself with the military. Your self-identity, your self-worth is very much tied into this thing called the military. and your service and your peers and all the mission and all these things. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in this purgatory where no one wants to talk to you, no one wants to touch you. You may or may not even be able to go into work, which means you no longer have a purpose. And you can't go into work because your clearance has been suspended, so you're not allowed on into the facility. Your leadership, air quotes on the leadership, because they don't want to have the funk come on to them, they might not even, you might, as an example, there's an officer who's been out of work for 4 years under investigation. In those 4 years, his leadership has not checked on him a single time. And so you feel a betrayal of what you understand as the duties, the responsibilities of your leadership, because we always say we take care of our people. We take care. People are number one. People are number one. And then once you're in it, you realize that that's just not true. And so there's feeling isolated, feeling targeted, well, not feeling, actually being targeted quite frequently, ostracized, feeling betrayed by your leadership. And all of this leads to the concept of moral injury. And this is something that we see over and over and over again with every single one of the cases with the people that we help with our foundation, where many of them, most of them, are under some sort of mental health care that they were not under prior to either being a subject or a complainant. And they have long-term diagnoses, occasionally, often, of PTSD, and are under medication for the PTSD because of this moral injury. Our president, Ryan Swayze, he was on a podcast several months ago. It's my favorite podcast, where he very astutely pointed out that service members are more willing to risk their lives in combat than they are to put their name openly on a sworn statement advocating for someone who is under investigation or who is a whistleblower, who's a complainant, because of the risk to career. It's not a glorious way to go. And so there's just a lot of problems with it. So, and then also, in addition to the reprisal you might be enduring, or the retaliation or restriction, whatever it is, as well as isolation, the being ostracized, being targeted, you also have to endure, if you're a victim, you also have to endure the trauma of re-traumatization that's inherent in the investigatory process, when you have to keep reliving and reliving and reliving and reliving whatever the incident was. You have to endure that over and over and over and over again, and keep telling your story, which continues to re-traumatize you. So that's what one of our major observations, and it's why I wanted to chat on this show, just to highlight to this community and to anybody else who would like to listen, to reinforce that the processes within the Department of Defense that exist currently, that are part of this DODIG, Department of Defense Inspector General system, the administrative processes that support them, the administrative punishments, reinforce that very real link to the military mental health and suicide epidemic, and to just inform and encourage anybody who's listening to do something about it. It's very easy to listen and wring our hands and clutch our pearls and, well, that's terrible. Yes, it is terrible. So what are you going to do about it? Write to your congressman, write to your senators, write papers on LinkedIn or Facebook, or join our foundation and let us know how we're doing. And Walk Talk Foundation. And so just do something about it, because it's so real. It's service members, by their very strength, have an incredible vulnerability, which is our foundation is trust, and when that trust is broken, it can be very mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, etc., damaging to our service members who really try to do the right thing. Not all of them, some of them are jerks, but most of them really, really do. So, so that's what I wanted to chat about today, Jason. I really appreciate it, and I think that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for enlightening us with that information. That is truly disturbing, and I will give you the stage as much as I can through our community to have you come back on our shows and talk more about what you have observed with Walk the Talk Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our broadcast for today. We will be back tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern for our third day of Freedom Fight Expo. We will be getting into the spiritual side of mental health and talking about the dream world. So if you're interested in that, we would love to have you. It's going to be a conversation. This will not be a live broadcast. It's going to be on Zoom. So after this broadcast, that Zoom link will be available in the comments of this episode. So ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful weekend. We will see you again tomorrow. Take care.